caught with flamethrower in their California wildfires, investigated for arson.
Deadly wildfires spreading across Southern California have left thousands of people without homes. At least one of those fires could have been started on purpose. LAPD even investigating a homeless man for arson. Here's everything we know about the fires right now. At least 10 people have died as a result of these wildfires. But we won't have an official death toll for quite a while because it's still unsafe for first responders to go into some of these burn zones. Tens of thousands of people have been forced to leave their homes and rush to safety, and at least 10,000 buildings have been burnt to the ground, including the homes of some big-name celebrities like Paris Hilton or Adam Brody. At the time of this recording, the fires are ongoing across the Los Angeles area, and there are actually multiple fires, pushing up dangerously close to LA landmarks like the Hollywood sign or Sunset Boulevard. The biggest fire is the Palisades fire. It's between Malibu and Pacific Palisades, even pushing up against Santa Monica. There's also the Eaton fire from the Pasadena area into the Angeles National Forest. The Hearst fire is north of the San Fernando Valley, and the Lydia fire is in the Antelope Valley area. And then there's the Kenneth Fire. And this is the fire that could have been started on purpose in an act of arson. His name wasn't released, but we did learn that the man was homeless and in his 30s. Neighbors in the Woodland Hills area reported the man started the fire about 4:30 Thursday evening. They called 911 right away, and as they were waiting for police to arrive, a bunch of the neighbors came and surrounded the man to make sure he couldn't run off. It was basically a giant citizen's arrest. Within 20 minutes, he was taken into custody. Early on, there were reports that the man started the fire with a propane tank or a flamethrower, and as of yesterday, an arson investigation is underway. So this story, new updates coming out almost by the second, and it's just devastating news one after another. But to talk about it a little bit more in depth, we're going to bring in former CIA officer and FBI agent Tracy Walder. And Tracy, right from the jump, you're from Southern California, and your family has been affected by all this, right?
Yes, I'm from Southern California. I was born in LA County, and then when I was about 7, my parents moved to Orange County. But unfortunately, my first cousins live in the Palisades.
Employers see tons of resumes every day and don't have time to carefully review them all, which means that one tiny mistake.
What has it been like for them? Have they had to evacuate their homes, I'm assuming?
Yes, so they lost their home, which, I mean, the reality is pretty much everyone in the Palisades lost their home. But I think even more importantly is that their children all lost their schools. And so, the reality is even if you try to rebuild there, right, there's no infrastructure to help the rest of the population. And so it will be very interesting to see how and if the Palisades comes back, because I think the loss of infrastructure isn't being, talked about as much.
I want to thank Upside for sponsoring today's Law&Crime YouTube takeover. Upside is a free app that gets you real cash back on gas, groceries, and at restaurants. It's super easy to use too. You just claim an offer in the app, pay as usual with your card, and then get cash back. And this is actually real cash back too. You can use Upside at places like Shell, Exxon, 7-Eleven, or even Chipotle. So to find how much you could earn, click the link in the description to download Upside or scan the QR code on your screen and use our promo code LCTakeover to get an extra 25 cents back on every gallon on your first tank of gas. And I feel like it's an overwhelming amount of destruction here because we have multiple wildfires going on at once. It's something I don't think I've ever seen before. I know you probably have followed California wildfire history better than I have. Have you ever seen anything to this magnitude?
No, I mean, I'm 46 years old and my family still is in Orange County as well. And, even in Orange County, we would get fires a lot in Laguna Canyon, where I'm from, and all of that, but nothing like this. And what I think is even more difficult is, so my best friend was evacuated because of that Runyon Canyon fire. She lives kind of right there. And so she went to her parents' house in Calabasas only to be evacuated because of the Kenneth Fire that was in Calabasas and Woodland Hills, and then went south, but then they extended the Palisades evacuations into sort of the Santa Monica area. So the reality is there's almost nowhere to go safely in Orange County. And so that's why, a lot of folks are considering fleeing down into Orange County and those other areas. That's what I've never seen before. Certainly, as you mentioned, we get fires, we just do, but nothing like this where there's nowhere safe necessarily to evacuate to.
That sounds like a true nightmare, going one place to the next, and these fires just keep popping up. And you brought up the Kenneth Fire, which is a huge one I want to talk about today because we've gotten word that it was actually started because of arson. Allegedly, this homeless man started it on purpose. How does an investigation like this even begin?
First of all, I want to say that it's being reported that they actually caught him within 20 minutes of this breaking out, which is very interesting to me. I think one of the reasons that it was raised initially that this may be arson is just for those people who may be familiar with this area. I think a lot of us thought this fire was intentional simply because the embers wouldn't have gone in that direction. Some of the other ones are explainable based on winds and embers and the direction and all of that. But this one, I think, really immediately jumped out to investigators as, being potentially arson. And so I think that right there, they were already on the lookout. But then I also think, too, you really have citizens and neighbors who have basically jumped into action, right? And caught this individual in what's being shown as in video as basically red-handed. So I do believe that investigators and firefighters already suspected initially that this fire was arson based on the burn pattern, based on how it started, and based on the location of where it started.
You talked about the neighbors, and I want to bring them up too, because this is almost an incredible story. The fact that they found this guy 20 minutes or so after he allegedly started this fire, which is a huge, quick response. And according to some of the neighbors who were there, they all kind of band together and surrounded him. It kind of made me think of like the Night Stalker, Richard Ramirez, also in the LA area, where people banded together to get this suspect. I mean, what do you make of all of that? Are these people going to be talking with FBI or investigators?
I mean, this is community policing, right? At its finest. That's exactly what's going on there. They saw something suspicious, and obviously they did something about it. Not to mention, he also had incendiary devices in his hand, basically a Molotov cocktail, if you will. And so the fact that they got him without violent incident, quite frankly, and were able to hold him there. Yes, they are all now obviously witnesses to this and will absolutely be questioned by LAPD, and the FBI. There's no question because now they're involved in this investigation.
The Molotov cocktail, that is just crazy to me. Some of the articles say things like flamethrower, which is something I've never seen before. I mean, I'm reading New York Times articles that mention a flamethrower that this guy apparently used. It's just crazy. But then when we're thinking about evidence, the fact that we have fire, a lot of it is burned. Does that make things more complicated?
It does make things more complicated, but if you look at, a lot of his arrest video, they have the flamethrower, on the hood of the police car. So it's very obvious. And you see him in the video with it in his hand. Yes, obviously in a fire, evidence is burned. Fingerprints are burned. Biological forensic evidence is not necessarily usable. However, one thing I think they may have going for them than they, didn't have 10, even 20 years ago is video. And I do think a lot of people forget this. It's a densely populated area. Yes, parts of.
Hey, Ben Stiller here. Right now, millions of refugees and displaced families are facing dangerous winter weather, and they need our help. Imagine trying to survive the bitter cold without adequate shelter, clothes, or heat. I've met refugees and displaced.
Calabasas are more open, but I believe he was arrested in Woodland Hills, which is pretty densely populated, actually where I was born. And so I think what they're going to have are Ring doorbell cameras. They're going to know directionality in terms of where he came from. They're going to know where this fire started. The fire department will be able to tell that after the investigation. And my hope is that they will be able to basically piece together his movements through digital evidence. And then also if he had a cell phone on him as well, putting him from a geolocational standpoint in that location will also be helpful.